it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being with us today. My name is Paul. This is Conduit News, and you have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality where we are building a liberty machine. We can't do the show without you listening, so we really do appreciate it. The flooding in Arkansas obviously is getting worse. I was just talking to somebody in the hallway right before the show started, and the hope is that we have seen the crest of this, at least that's the hope. I have a story here. Of course, yesterday we had the news of the levee that had been, the levee didn't fail, but you had the river going over a levee, overtopping a levee in Yell County. We have the story that's on the front page of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette today from Stephen Simpson about the helicopter flight that state leaders took to survey the flooding damage across our great state. And it does appear to be, all accounts report that it is extensive, and the governor saying, quote, "As I flew over today, the most significant impression I had is that it's hard to imagine the magnitude of the flooding. It's hard to comprehend. We have never seen this before, and we have never had to deal with this before." Apparently, it's just, massive amounts of water. And the problem is you have more, obviously we've got potential weather to deal with, more rain and that sort of thing. That's obviously going to make the situation worse. But the Mississippi River is full, too, and so as this comes down the Arkansas River, there's really no other place for this water to go than to flood tributaries and lakes that are connected to the Arkansas River. And so this is going to be a situation that we're going to have to persevere through for quite some time, from what I can tell. Obviously, this has started when heavy rains in Oklahoma and Kansas forced the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to release water from a lake, a hydroelectric dam near Tulsa. And of course, I've seen a lot of people on social media upset with this, because obviously this is the big reason why there's so much river now downstream in Arkansas, uprooting people's lives, flooding their homes, and destroying their possessions. According to the Gazette, they write, the National Weather Service officials have said flooding will continue along the river as the water crests on its way downstream over the next week. Governor Hutchinson said Thursday more than 500 homes have been affected by flooding. One death also has been linked to flooding, and this is, we keep going here. The Adjutant General, Mark Berry, is quoted as saying, "It really puts it all in perspective. We have a long road ahead of us." This is something, the governor goes on, this is something we don't think about very often, but how this disrupts the flow of raw materials, finished products from our factories, how it impacts our ability to get product in or out is significant. This is the governor commenting on an estimate that is now going around that because of the flooding and the disruption of the roads, there are roads closed all over the state of Arkansas this morning. Because of that, you have an estimated daily loss of the gross domestic product of $23 million per day is what the governor referenced the other day. The Federal Emergency Management Agency announced that President Donald Trump had authorized it to identify, mobilize, provide, at its discretion, equipment and resources necessary to alleviate the impact of the emergency. There's no specific monetary amount mentioned, but anyway, we do have... it's just a terrible situation all around. It really is. Feel free, if you guys have any updates out there, we would love to hear about it. And the number 870-275-9799. You can call or text. That's 870-275-9799. And we will tell you more as this story develops. I mean, you know, it's a tragedy. It really is. Anytime you have this this type of flooding, and anytime you have this, really, this is about the people who have to live through all of this. It is a tragedy. In other news this morning on this Johnny Cash Friday, which we will get to our Johnny Cash music here in just a moment. Oh, by the way, let me say a couple things. Coming up at 7 in studio, we'll be talking with State Representative Jack Ladyman. It's always great to have him on the program. Then at 7:33, we'll be talking to State Representative Brant Smith. Now, he'll be calling in because I understand he is helping out at Girl State, apparently has started. Joe, do you understand what Girl State is? You remember Boys State? Did you go to Boys State by chance? I went to Boys State when I was in high school. I'm not even sure how you get selected to go. I just got selected somehow, and I went. And I think I've told people this before. I did not have a good time at Boys State. Boys State was, let's just say, I'm sorry. Listen, I know it was beneficial. I think I ran for senator or something, got elected senator, and that was my first time. That was the second time. I paged for a family member once when I was young at the Capitol, at the Marble Palace, and then I got to sit in the Senate chamber when I was like in high school because at Boys State I managed to get elected senator. I'm not really sure how that happened, which is probably not too far off from how some of these people feel as well. I'm really not sure how I got here, but now I'm here. I mean, I'm on the floor. But yeah, I just didn't really have a great time at Boys State. That's at least in my memory. But maybe it's because it was in the summer, and I had to go do something that was, essentially contributing further to my institutionalization. So anyway, but it is good work. It is, So we'll be talking with State Representative Brant Smith when at 7:33. Yeah, we got two. We got Jack Ladyman at 7. And Brant Smith at 7:33. Anyway, real quick, also another observation. I know I'm kind of getting these announcements out of the way, but if you haven't seen the HBO series Chernobyl, I watched 2 episodes last night, me and the missus. And first of all, there's a ton of stuff I didn't know about Chernobyl. If I am, I'm assuming that the events are, for the most part, historically accurate. I had no idea that there was essentially, and and this is sort of spoiler, but I mean, if you essentially watch this, it's not a big spoiler, it's not really, but you have the initial guys, the initial heads of the nuclear facility. The head guy just refused to admit that the core had exploded because it wasn't possible, just impossible for the core to explode. Never mind, you had all of this evidence saying, hey, the core at Chernobyl is exploding. You got to check this series out. It's a mini series. I don't know how many episodes it is. Like I said, I watched 2 of them yesterday afternoon into the evening, and it was just it was incredible. The radiation sickness, all kinds of stuff. The different moving parts, the risk there. At Chernobyl, how they tried to keep it under wraps, and the world figured it out because, I don't know, the Scandinavian countries all of a sudden, started detecting massive amounts of radiation, and people in Germany weren't letting their kids go outside. All of this was happening while Russian towns had not yet been evacuated. It's fascinating, and I can't believe it got made because it paints communism in a terrible light. You'll understand what I'm saying. If you're a limited government person, and you need to watch this Chernobyl series. So far, I'm only 2 episodes in, and from what I can tell, it's just very, there's not anything obscene. You know what I'm saying? Like, now it might be some of the time. I can't stand it how, I've talked about this with you, Joe. There'll be some series on Netflix or something, and you'll watch it, and it says like, oh, okay, this is interesting. Okay, I think I can buy in, and you get 1 episode in, and then you get another episode, and then all of a sudden, you either just have all of this obscenity that comes. Like once you're hooked onto the thing, it's like, okay, now, or the characters do something that's just like, that's just crazy, and you're like, okay, I don't want to watch this anymore. But yet I invested 2 hours in watching something, and now I'm going to give it up. But so far, it seems to be more of a historical epic. But they really paint these Soviet committees as being, zombies who can't think for themselves. They're also afraid of stepping out of line and the Communist Party coming down on them. And that was a big reason why it took a long time for, people to figure out and somebody actually to admit, hey, no, the Chernobyl situation is way worse than what the scientists on the ground initially were telling the government. Anyway, you got to check it out. All right, in other news, let's get to what President Trump tweeted and how the left lost their mind. Did you see this, Joe? Trump sparked a social media frenzy yesterday when he had, I'll say it was an unfortunate way to phrase, a message about the Russia hoax, but it sent the left into therapy once again. Sent them into a complete frenzy. So one day after Robert Mueller tried to rally the base, rally the troops, and get the Democrats to impeach. By the way, Alan Dershowitz is now saying the Democrats impeached Trump at their own 2020 peril. Meaning, that's what I said yesterday, by the way. I halfway raised my hand and said, I think if they impeach him, it would help him. That's what I think. Help the president's chances even more. So President Trump comes out and tweets this. Scrolling down, keep going. Let's get the actual tweet here. Keep going right here. Russia, Russia, Russia. Marsha, Marsha, Marsha. Russia, Russia, Russia. That's all you heard at the beginning of this witch hunt hoax. And now Russia has disappeared because I had nothing to do with Russia helping me get elected. It was a crime that didn't exist. So now the Dems and their partner, the fake news media, say he fought back against this phony crime that didn't exist, this horrendous false accusation, and he shouldn't fight back. He should just sit back and take it. Now, so the left, scrolling back up, the left says, can you believe he admitted, and they freak out, he admitted that Russia did help him get elected. Now, he went out to the lawn and was asked, did Russia help you get elected? He was like, no, I got me elected. Russia didn't get me elected. It's an unfortunate phrasing. I was talking to somebody about it. If you can you hear the president talk while he's tweeting this? They are. He's essentially saying, Russia, Russia, Russia. That's all you heard at the beginning of this witch hunt hoax. And now Russia has disappeared because I had nothing to do with Russia helping me get elected hoax. Essentially, the narrative that Russia helped him get elected. He's saying that you don't really hear about it because there's no crime. But now what they do, they move the goalposts and they say, well, you obstructed the investigation, which again is ridiculous because it's very, very difficult to claim someone obstructs justice when there is no evidence of an underlying crime. Anyway, so they freak out about this, and to me, it's just I just think it's hilarious. Zero Hedge, blue check marks everywhere were inflamed at Trump's apparent misphrasing. Russia helping me get elected? Trump admits it and still doesn't get it. Mueller discussed Russia at length yesterday, and if POTUS had nothing to do with Russia, why did he call on them for emails? Okay, this is obviously, once again, the left is so anti-comedy, they can't even get jokes, even if they're from their political opponents. That was a fantastic line when the president said, oh, by the way, Russia, if you're listening, maybe you can find Hillary's 30,000 emails. That was a fantastic line. It was great, and it's part of the campaign, and he wasn't being serious, but everybody thinks, okay, well, he was being serious, you know. I mean, it's just... Russia did not help me get elected. You know who got me elected? I got me elected. Russia, if anything, helped the other side. So then we have a fact check. Let's go to Breitbart.com. No, Trump did not admit Russia helped him get elected. Joel Pollack writes, the mainstream media and the political left are celebrating what they are describing as an admission by President Trump that Russia helped him win the 2016 president. It can't possibly be your bad ideas that lost you the election and Trump's positive ideas that, well, let's say, you know, that resonated with the people more than Hillary Clinton. On Thursday morning, Trump tweeted, Russia, Russia, Russia. We've, you know, went over this. So now the Dems and their partner, the fake news media, are they even a partner anymore? The Democrat Party and the media are the same party. They're part of the Democrat Party. They say he fought back against this phony crime that didn't exist, this horrendous false accusation, and he shouldn't fight back. He should just sit back. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm reading the tweet over again. Skipping down. The awkwardly worded phrase, Russia helping me get elected, is being treated as a confession. A Freudian slip that reveals the president's true state of mind, though he also called the idea a crime that doesn't exist. A false accusation in the same tweet, suggesting that Trump was simply rejecting the allegations about collusion as a whole. Again, but you can't expect the liberals to actually understand context, because they're the same people that are now trying to say that if you're white and you flash the sign, okay, like, okay, sounds good, that you're a white supremacist, because somehow this symbol now means something that means you're a white. So something that is so common that I say, okay, sounds good, is now an example of white privilege. Or you know what? And they're so totalitarian in their way of thinking. Even if you could get them to admit, well, not everybody that does this, because they don't know what it means, not everybody that flashes the OK sign is a white supremacist, but then they would advocate, but they must be woke, they must be aware, and they must stop using the sign so that we can properly identify and go get the ones that really are. It's all about it's really all about controlling people. It's not about freedom, I'll tell you that much. The New York Times ran a story about Trump's comments under the headline, Trump admits to Russia helping me get elected. The story rocketed to the top of social media as Trump's detractors circulated the tweets in the story. The Times added that Trump has avoided saying publicly that Russia helped him win the presidency in 2016 through its election interference. The implication of that sentence is that Trump might have said so or thought so privately. It also presumes Russia actually helped him win. It can't possibly be that the left's ideas were rejected by the American people, that they're anti-First Amendment, anti-comedy, they are anti-freedom for almost everything. Trump has acknowledged before that Russian intelligence agencies attempted to interfere with the election, even if he also accepted, likely for diplomatic reasons, Russian President Vladimir Putin's public assurances that it did not. Special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation concluded that Russia operatives sought to help Trump win, though critics argued that the primary goal of Russian interference, some of which targeted Republicans, was to sow chaos. Well, of course. What about Christopher Steele, Hillary Clinton, the DNC, the Russia dossier, or the Russian dossier, and Christopher Steele allegedly got that from the Russians. The false, phony, salacious dossier. And for those of you out there who think, well, how do we know it was phony? Well, because James Comey admitted it was. Told the president himself it was phony. And now we have Comey. And you know why Mueller, real quick, Mueller did what he did 2 days ago because he knows William Barr. They've got to discredit Barr because Barr and Trump are actually looking at Obama administration officials now and how they handled this whole thing, and they're freaking out about it. So what do? They use their party, which includes the mainstream media, to take control of the narrative. Back in a minute. All right, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, 870-275-9799. We've been doing these things. You guys know the drill. It's the impression of session time. We got 2 more tomorrow. Welcome to the program. State Representative Josh Miller is with us. He's from District 66. Josh, how are you, sir?
Man, I'm doing good, Paul. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's always great to have you on, sir. So we're going to just take it. It's impression of the session. Let's just let you have the floor, and then we can talk specifics later. State Representative Josh Miller, what was your impression of the session 2019?
Well, I thought there was some of it that was good, and some of it that sucked. And if you're a taxpayer in Arkansas, you probably, weren't that happy. If you're a freeloader in the state of Arkansas, you came out okay. And anyway, that's pretty much my impression.
Wow. So if you're a taxpayer, you weren't happy. If you're a freeloader, you came out okay. Now, when you say that, are you referring to, the fact that, according to the DFA numbers that I've seen, it looks like the people of Arkansas are going to be paying more money to the government after the session than they were before the session.
Right. That's what I'm saying. We did cut some taxes, had the income tax reduction, and that was a good thing. But then, we're raising the gas taxes and all the other little ways that you get nickeled and dimed. That's not good. We are going to be paying more into the government. When the projection numbers were released here not too long ago, and we were in, let's say, council when that happened, or when we heard it, we realized that we were going to be getting enough extra revenue just from a better economy.
Wow.
That we could have pretty much taken care of the highway problem without raising taxes one bit. But that's not what we did. So anyhow, there's that's my impression on that. And then again, if you're we haven't done a whole lot as far as going back, like in what I was saying about if you're a freeloader, you're still okay. If you're just taking care of or continuing to count on government subsidies and all that kind of stuff, you're still fine because we're not making any changes to those. And anyway, if you're a big insurance company, you're going to continue to make record profits.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. We're talking State Representative Josh Miller. You did have a bill that would have a government subsidy
for service model on the Medicaid expansion
of newspapers.
State taxpayer dollars.
Do you know the government subsidizes certain newspapers? There's a new piece up over at Conduit for Action. It'll be cross-posted at Conduit News. It's fascinating. It's written by the former head of the Arkansas Bureau of Legislative Research. Mr. David Ferguson is back with another piece. A government subsidy of newspapers. And you need to check this out. We're going to go over this later in the program today. Again, coming up at 7:05, we'll be talking with State Representative Jack Ladyman. Then at 7:33, State Representative Brant Smith. And they're going to be giving their impressions of the session, right? So we were doing these, and we've got another week next week, chock full of impression of the sessions as well. We got to take a hard break for our affiliates. Back in just a moment. State taxpayers are a gargantuan amount of money, and you couldn't get it out of committee. did you think you were going to get it out of committee? I mean, because I was thinking, this bill probably didn't have a chance because of Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Right. I did think I was going to get it out of committee. I knew there were, those in leadership that were against the bill. It was a big idea. We were going to be making some major changes to our Medicaid expansion program, and those in leadership convinced a couple of votes that were Republicans to go with them and vote against the bill. And that's really what hurt it. Of course, all the Democrats voted against it, which I thought was hilarious, because all the bill did was basically just Medicaid expansion as was originally prescribed by the Affordable Care Act. And we had some really, really conservative Democrats in the House Public Health, I guess, that wanted to vote against Obamacare. So kudos to those guys and ladies.
Wow, yeah, that is interesting. I remember that. That was so strange. You would think the Democrats, but of course, it just goes to show you. I was talking last hour about the uniparty. Sometimes you get the Democrats and Republicans locking arms on things that just don't make any sense. And I think it's because it comes down to the money, and you do have these giant corporate interests that want to continue receiving corporate welfare. Even if the people aren't going to the doctor, they just have an insurance policy. We're talking with State Representative Josh Miller. Josh, what about ethics? And we heard all this talk at the beginning of the session about ethics and how we needed to have ethics reform. Are you comfortable with the amount of ethics changes that happened, or do you think there should be more?
Paul, I will say this, that personally, I don't feel any less ethical now than I did before the session started. Or more. I don't know, man. It's the bottom line. We can have committees and reforms and legislature and all this stuff. You can't legislate just honest, decent behavior, and that's basically what all that comes down to. I don't know. I'm not saying there doesn't need to be something else. I can't think of it right now, but the bottom line is if people want to get involved in state government or federal government or whatever at some level and be crooks, they're going to find a way. And that's why it's just very important that we pay attention to who we're voting for and who we're electing and who we're hiring to be in different positions, because if we hire the wrong people, they can make off with a few $1 million of taxpayer money. And they might go to prison for it.
Yeah,
hopefully.
Yeah, I can appreciate your sentiment. I think that's a really good notion. That if you want to be a crook, if you're you're a politician and you want to do, you're going to find a way to do it, because the system, we are giving people, when we vote for them, we're giving them power, and so they're going to be able to use that power to their advantage if they're so inclined to do so. So we do have to pay attention, and I honestly think, Josh, that is an argument for limited government. I mean, if you can't guarantee that there's not going to be, in this fallen world, somebody who's going to get up there and try to use their power to hurt other people who are just out there trying to make a living, then that means that what the government has the authority to do should be kept very limited in its size and its scope. Do you agree?
I do 100% agree. That you hit the nail on the head right there.
So let's talk about social issues. Because, we've established that the tax policy, and look, I've talked to you before, we know the taxes were, it was good to cut taxes here, but then they raised taxes, and then they took a lot more than they gave us. And I don't even like that terminology, but, social issues, seemed there was some unity there, right?
Well, yeah, I think so. we're a very strong pro-life state. That's not going to change anytime soon. Anytime we can, run a bill that has anything to do with a pro-life stance, you're going to see quite a bit of unity there. Also, guns. That's another bill, another big deal. Very strong Second Amendment. Quite a bit of unity there. Maybe not as much unity as some would like. I think we should combine the two next session.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Here we go. That's one of my favorite Johnny Cash songs. Man, it's pretty amazing. The Gospel Road, for those of you watching online, if you didn't get to hear that one because of Facebook's embargo on, radio stations playing radio music on their platform. Yeah, Sony's got a problem with that. Anyway, it's called The Gospel Road. It's really good. So, Joe, you might not know this, but the FBI back in Martin Luther King Jr.'s time, the FBI, did extensive wiretaps and surveillance on Martin Luther King Jr. They didn't like him. They thought he was subversive. And recently, some of the reports that took place, from being bugged, recently some of those reports revealed some disturbing activities of Martin Luther King. So let's see here. Scrolling down, a report. Listen to this. Now this is from Matt Walsh. Okay, a report in a publication called Standpoint makes some startling claims about civil rights icon Martin Luther King Jr. We should know that this article is in something called Standpoint rather than, say, the New York Times, because the American mainstream media did not have the courage for it. Indeed, David Garrow, the award-winning biographer who authored the piece based on information found in FBI documents, was not able to find any outlet in the United States willing to publish the details about civil rights icon Martin Luther King Jr. This is what Garrow says in his piece. Newly released documents reveal the full extent of the FBI's surveillance of the civil rights leader, Dr. Martin Luther King, in the mid-1960s. They expose in graphic detail the FBI's intense focus on King's extensive extramarital sexual relationships with dozens of women, and also his presence in a Washington hotel room when a friend, a Baptist minister, allegedly raped one of his parishioners while King looked on, laughed, and offered advice. The FBI's tape recording of that criminal assault still exists today, resting under court seal in a National Archives vault. Now, in light of the Me Too movement, do you see where we're going with? Do you see why the mainstream media might not want to even touch this situation? More. This is the specific allegation. At the Willard Hotel, King and his friends' activities resumed the following evening as approximately 12 individuals participated in a party of a sexual nature, which the prudish Assistant Director William C. Sullivan, head of the Domestic Intelligence Division, felt included acts of degeneracy and depravity when one of the women shied away from engaging. King and several of the men discussed, they were being really terrible, and they suggested that this woman need to participate because it would, quote, help your soul. Now, this according to the report. Now, okay, we're talking about Martin Luther King Jr. Now, we know that the FBI, surveilled him and had all these recordings of him, but now this is all, coming out, right? Because we have historical figures and we have people in the past who are far, 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 far from perfect, right? Yet Martin Luther King Jr. is in the history books. There's all kinds of monuments to Martin Luther King Jr., what Martin Luther King Jr. stood for, what he did. So what do you do with that? Well, if you're a leftist, ladies and gentlemen, and you want to be consistent, but that's impossible, right? But if you believe that you have to take the evils of the past and try to perfect them yourself to make yourself feel better, more secure, because you can recognize an injustice, but you don't know how to reconcile it because we've pushed the concept of a higher power and God out of public life. That's unacceptable now. The reconciliation that you find in Jesus actually makes life worth living, and it does explain all of the bad stuff. The idea how people can do good things and terrible things. Matt Walsh over at the Daily Wire, who really is a professional sayer of truths, as he describes himself, Garrow's report includes many details like this. A picture is painted of a binge-drinking alcoholic and serial adulterer who constantly used his position as a supposed man of God and civil rights leader to sexually exploit women. King also alleged to have physically attacked a number of his sex partners, including one whose clothes he tore off. Keep going down. Matt Walsh asks this question, so what do we do with this information? He writes, the American media has decided to do nothing with this information. I imagine many Americans will follow suit. They will put their fingers in their ears and pretend they never heard it. King will continue to be worshipped to the same extent as before. These points about his life and character will not make it into textbooks and will not be discussed in classrooms. King will be canonized before his death, deified upon his death, King was canonized before his death, deified upon his death, and there probably isn't anything that will reverse that process in the year 2019. But, he writes, for those who wish to have integrity and moral courage and who abhor hypocrisy, there seems to be only two options. Number one. Option number one. The new standard applied to Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Christopher Columbus, Robert E. Lee, hello Arkansas, Robert E. Lee, and any number of other white historical figures can also be applied to Martin Luther King Jr. As these men have gone from heroes to villains. Now let's stop here for a second and kind of camp out on Arkansas. Arkansas, a couple years ago, decided to adopt the mainstream media narrative that Republicans are racist. So Republicans decided to separate Robert E. Lee and Martin Luther King holidays that were celebrated on the same day to prove that they weren't racist. It was absolutely ridiculous. Matter of fact, when the bill fell 2 years prior, then the media got to say they are racist, and I'm just like, you guys are politically illiterate. You guys do not know what you are doing by adopting this bogus notion that the party that ended slavery has somehow got to prove now by separating days of a white man and a black man celebrated on the same day, which apparently Martin Luther King wouldn't be for, and that's not true. We know he'd be fine with that based on what he said publicly. But do you understand, why did we need to separate the day? Well, we needed to separate the day because Robert E. Lee was bad and Martin Luther King was good. That was essentially the notion that was being advanced by Arkansas politicians 2 years ago. And what did that lead to? Well, then it led to looking at the star on the Arkansas flag. Well, it stands for the Confederacy. We don't need that. We don't need that in our state. Next up will be the Civil War monuments on the Capitol grounds. Yes, we do have those. But now we have this FBI information about Martin Luther King Jr. And what do you do with it? What do you do with it? Do you apply the same standard that we now apply to George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Christopher Columbus, Robert E. Lee, any number of other white historical figures, back to Matt Walsh, can also be applied now to Martin Luther King Jr., as these men have gone from heroes to villains, and their memorials have been torn down as a result, their murals destroyed, their names removed, their monuments defaced. So the same treatment can be doled out to King. He did not share the same sins as these men, but his sins were no better. Washington and company are blamed for being racists, who either participated in or condoned slavery. King, if these very credible reports are true, was a violent misogynist who condoned rape. Would anyone really like to argue that one sin is better than the other? I'd say they're both hideously evil, Matt Walsh writes. Indeed, rape and slavery grow from the same tree. Slave owner exploits and dehumanizes his victim. So does the rapist. It is sad that the achievements of our founding fathers come with a giant asterisk because their zeal for freedom and liberty did not apply to non-whites. Well, and that's not necessarily true, by the way. In some cases, you couldn't free your slaves if you wanted to because it was against Virginia state law. But that's another. There was context there. But yeah. In order to form a nation, they didn't want to fight that battle at that time. That's for sure. Well, a similar asterisk now accompanies King, whose zeal for equal rights did not apply to the woman whose brutal rape he reportedly applauded. Again, according to FBI tapes. If an asterisk is enough to knock down a statue, then King statues must be toppled too. That is option one. That is standard one if you apply what the left is doing to historical figures who, newsflash, are capable of doing bad things and good things. Here's option two, though. Matt Walsh, the other option, and the one that I favor, is that we develop a different standard that can be equally applied to all historical figures. Rather than canonize our heroes on one hand or demonize them on the other, we can humanize them. We begin to see them as real people, not caricatures, and we strive to understand and appreciate them as such. We do not hide our faces from the darker elements of their personalities. We do not justify their sins or rationalize them. We discuss them openly and honestly, and we don't look to turn them into cartoon villains either. We see them as men, nothing more or less than that. If they achieved great things, Matt Walsh writes, if they managed feats that few could manage, if they altered the course of human history, then we honor those accomplishments and perhaps even build statues in remembrance. We don't erase anyone from the history books just because they had personal flaws, even very serious flaws. But perhaps we add another page or two. We keep the monuments because the monuments are part of our history and culture, but we keep in mind that the person commemorated by the monument was just that, a person. And that is how we think of them and remember them. If this is where our reassessment of our historical heroes ultimately leads, he writes, I think it will be a positive change. We will finally be remembering and studying history like adults, not children. And it is through that more nuanced lens that we can, I think, continue to honor Martin Luther King Jr. despite the terrible evil he may have done. But he does not get to be an exception. If we extend that grace to Martin Luther King and his legacy, then we must extend it equally to all of our historical heroes. He is not a special case. He was just a man, just like them, and just as flawed. And that's the point. Matt Walsh is always amazing. So glad he's working at the Daily Wire. And you can check it out. It's up at thedailywire.com. Makes an excellent point. What? What did I say something?
No. It's me. It's not you.
Sometimes I'm like, what? Joe gets this look on his face, and I'm like, what did I don't remember. Somebody was telling me the other day. Somebody came up to me the other day. It was a political figure the other day, and this person was talking about, maybe coming on the show sometime, and maybe there was some negative things that have been said in the past in the press, and I thought, I was like, did I say something? I'm sorry. I just want to say sorry, I'm just trying to do my job or whatever, and this person's like, no, it wasn't you, it was somebody else. I was like, it's probably a character flaw, but sometimes I can't remember what I say about people who are in the news. I mean, because it's a talk radio program. It's for now. I should make a practice of it. That's why we have the internet. Go back and listen. Anyway, you can do that at conduitnews.com. By the way, give us $5 a month and get an extra bonus video. Patreon.com/CNR. That's Patreon.com/CNR. We're not subtle here. We want to just come at you, and just right up to your face and say, hey, give us $5 a month, and you'll be supporting the program that's trying to give you the news that you're not getting anywhere else, or perspective you're not getting anywhere else, specifically on Arkansas news and politics. Conduitnews.com, Patreon.com/CNR. Back in just a moment.
And look into the possibility of running a bill that says every baby born in the state of Arkansas gets a firearm and a scholarship for an enhanced carry permit
Just
at birth.
Up. Yeah. At birth.
Yes. Awarded at birth. I may run that bill. I'm not sure.
I think that's fantastic.
And then we can take care of our social issues just right up front. Here's what we're going to do. If you, when you're born in the state of Arkansas, you get a gun and a scholarship for an enhanced carry class.
That's great. I love it.
So we could have the Patriots of Act 746 and Family Council working together, consulting on this bill, and I think it would be wonderful.
They're listening right now. I'm sure both. I know for a fact people from both of those organizations are listening right now. So that would be great. You need to draft that up. Send it to us. We'll write an article.
I'm going to work on that.
Okay.
I'm going to work on that. Hey, one thing that was really important to me during the session, and in all seriousness, was we finally got a bill passed that is going to mandate that DHS eliminate the developmentally disabled waiver waiting list. I've been working on that for a number of sessions, and we finally got that done. Had some great help with a few of my colleagues during the session on that. My Senate co-sponsor, Senator Hammer, was fantastic. Also had a lot of help from Senator Brian Davis over there, and that was the biggest win to me in the session, was getting that bill passed, because that's actually going to benefit and do some good for folks and make a difference in some lives. And I didn't want to completely badmouth the session without bringing that.
No. And you've been working on that. You've been working on that for a long time, haven't you, Josh?
I have. I think this was the third session that we've run that bill.
Wow.
And before, I'd never been able to get it out of committee.
Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
And this year it passed both chambers unanimously.
Wow, that's fantastic. And so, yeah, congratulations on that. And I know that's a huge achievement for you because, we really were not as a state on the moral high ground without taking care of those who are the truly needy while we're spending all this money to pay for able to work adults' health insurance, right?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, you can the folks on this waiting list, many of whom I talked to and heard from, they felt like the state was being quite hypocritical because they've been on a waiting list for 10, 12, 13 years, and they call to find out, hey, is there any way we can get services or whatever, and they're constantly told, no, we don't have the money. Well, we spent $400 million this last year paying the insurance company's profit margin on our Medicaid expansion program.
Mm-hmm.
And these folks look at that and they feel kind of like the state's being hypocritical.
So real quick, I'm so glad you got that done. That's a good thing. So, we're taking care of those who truly can't take care of themselves now. So there isn't that hypocrisy. But I want to back up. You mentioned the insurance company's profit margins. Back when you were trying to take us for fee-for-service, that was a key component of your testimony. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because some people seem to dispute, the profit margins of Medicaid expansion for Blue Cross Blue Shield and others.
Sure. I mean, it's in the Arkansas Works Law. It was in the original private option law language. It requires that these insurance companies spend a minimum of 80% of their revenue on medical loss. That's actually 80% of their money taking care of sick people. And paying for, medical needs, whatever, healthcare. The other 20%, I mean, you can say some of that's administrative costs. I get that. But, in Arkansas, to take care of 270,000 people, do you need $400 million for administrative costs? I mean, and what exactly is administrative costs? That's your responsibilities include sending people a new card when it's up. I don't know. There's, $400 million is 20% of the $2 billion that we spent on the program. That's math. And so, maybe I can assure you insurance companies...
Hey, folks, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. Coming up here at 7:05, so we're going to take a short break, but we're going to be talking with State Representative Jack Ladyman in his impression of the session. You do not want to miss it. And then at 7:33, State Representative Brant Smith will also be on giving his impression. We're got kind of a Northeast Arkansas flair today. And also we do want to cover some of what's going on if we can. President Trump declaring he will increase tariffs 5% on all products. So buy your avocados now. Anyway, I'm an avocado fan. But anyway, this is probably part of it. I mean, they're enabling this mass violation of our law, violation of our sovereignty. We'll see you here on the other side of this break. Don't go anywhere. Happy Friday.
Sure. I mean, it's in the Arkansas Works Law. It was in the original private option law language. You know, it requires that these insurance companies spend a minimum of 80% of their revenue on medical loss. That's actually 80% of their money taking care of sick people, and paying for, you know, medical needs, whatever, health care. The other 20%, I mean, you can say some of that's administrative costs. I get that. But, you know, in Arkansas, to take care of 270,000 people, do you need $400 million for administrative costs? I mean, and what exactly is administrative costs? That's your responsibilities include sending people a new card when it's up. I don't know. There's, you know, I mean, $400 million is 20% of the $2 billion that we spent on the program. That's math. And so, yeah, I mean, maybe I can assure you insurance companies are not spending more than they have to.
Yes.
They're not doing it. And then they want to come back every single year and ask for a rate increase and all this other kind of stuff. And then we don't have, you know, another problem we have is we don't have the competition. Back in 2013 and 14 when the private option was introduced, we were going to have all this competition. It was going to keep prices low. I mean, we have two companies in the program now, Blue Cross and Centene. And you know, it's just the competition stuff there. The prices are up. Like I said, $2 billion to take care of 270,000 people.
It's a gargantuan amount of money, and you know, we also need to remember. So if 20% of that's $400 million, and so 20% of that profit or administrative costs or whatever, we also have to remember
Right.
that you know, the Medicaid expansion population is not their only source of revenue either. It's not like they've got all this other money that's already funding administrative costs, presumably. So you were essentially saying, listen, we'll at least save $400 million, right? I mean, that was your argument. Go for fee for service, and we'll at least save $400 million.
It would be a minimum of $400 million. Now, that $400 million is, you know, shared between the state and the federal government. But, you know, this coming year, we're going to be paying, or in 2020, we're going to be paying, the state will be paying 10% of the cost of Medicaid expansion. All right, 10% of $400 million is $40 million. That's $40 million out of state revenue that is just being wasted on insurance companies' profit. That's not taking care of one person, not paying for one person's doctor visit or anything. $40 million just to say, hey, Blue Cross and Centene, we love y'all and sure do appreciate you. I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
You know, it's a joke. And anyway, hopefully, I put the bill up for interim study. I heard this crap out of a lot of people is that, it was, you know, Representative Miller, it was late in the session, and, you know, it's not something we might not want to take that up that late in the session because, you know, it could delay us getting out. Which, hey, nobody was more ready to get out of that session and be done with it than me. But, you know, sometimes, you know, I'm like, well, okay, we can put it off for 2 more years and waste another $800 million in the meantime. But, hey, you know, what's money to a hog?
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, I appreciate the work that you're doing, and I appreciate your impression of the session, State Representative Josh Miller. It's always a pleasure to have you on, and just keep up the good work. Keep fighting the good fight, sir. We appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, Paul. Appreciate you having me.
All right. Folks, we're going to take a break.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. Hour number 2, Johnny Cash Friday. We're going to get to some great Johnny Cash music when we go to break. Coming up at 7:33, we'll be talking with State Representative Brant Smith. He'll be giving his impression of the session. Here now, live in studio, we got State Representative Jack Ladyman is with us. Jack, how are you, sir?
Doing good, Paul. Thank you for having me.
It's always great to have you on, sir.
It's great to be here.
And in studio. So impression of the session, 92nd General Assembly. We'll just kind of start there. State Representative Jack Ladyman, what was your impression of the session 2019?
Well, Paul, let me say I was a lot more involved in this session. Of course, I retired back in January from my day job, so I had more time to spend, and got a lot more involved. And I think it was a good session. I actually think we did a lot of good things. The thing that I like to tell people when I get an opportunity to talk are the smaller things that we did during the session, because a lot of people talk about the big things, and they need to be talked about, and they're important issues, and people need to know where we all stand on that. But there are a lot of small things that are really good things that we did that helps the state or helps groups of people in the state. After all, we're representatives. That's our job title.
Yeah.
So if I have 1 or 2 people in my district that has an issue, I need to represent them. So we have good bills that only apply to a few people that really don't get out into the public, that people need to know about, because there are good things that we do. As you know, I'm a little bit of a full glass person.
Yep.
When it comes to glass of water.
You got that binder?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
And so I like to talk about the good things, and you know, you need to, we have a platform, and we, as a representative or a senator, we need to help motivate people to do better. And I learned from coaching that you can motivate people and they can accomplish great things that they don't even know they can do. So I think we have a responsibility to do that. But getting back to the subject, I think it was a good session. I think it was the best one since I've been down there. Now there's a lot of discussion, controversy, disagreement on some of the things that we passed. But those important things, and we can talk about the highway plan. Everybody talks about that, so I don't want to spend all my time doing that.
Well, yeah, we can get that out of the way and we can move on. Let's just, if you don't mind, the tax policy. Let's just talk about that.
Well,
go ahead.
Here's my stand. I think I've said this before on your program. You know, I didn't sign a no tax commitment because I don't believe in that. I believe there are cases where you might have to do that to increase taxes. I'm against raising taxes in general. But, you know, in business and in my private life, I've learned that, you know, put things in categories. There's critical needs, there's needs, and then there's wants. If you have a critical need, and speaking as an ex-mayor, you know, people have to have good, clean drinking water. That's a critical need. So in the city, if you have a need for that, to maintain that, that's got to be done. That's critical. Mm-hmm. Fire department, if a house catches on fire and they call 911, the truck's got to get there. If you need police, if it's a safety issue and you call 911, that police car has to get there and the guy has to get there fully equipped. Those are critical needs. If you cannot maintain those services adequately for your citizens, then you have to have extra revenue. So those are critical needs. And I would vote for a tax increase for those critical needs if it cannot be covered any other way. And I felt like the road program fell into that, because roads are critical to jobs. In our society today, Paul, as you know, we buy most things at the grocery store. Mm-hmm. So we would not have food if we didn't have a way. there. So roads are critical.
No doubt about that.
No doubt. Now, there's debate and there's differences on, well, what is adequate roads, But I think most people realize that we pushed this down the road enough that we really needed to do something. If you've driven from Jonesboro to Little Rock on Future 57, you know that there's some work that needs to be done.
Well, you got to stay in that left-hand lane, don't you?
Exactly. I mean, that's a good example.
Done. Yeah.
And that's only one example. If you drive around the state, as you probably do, and I do, you know that there are places in the state that really need some attention.
Yeah.
And the Highway Department tells us that they don't have adequate resources. Now, they may not be using those resources correctly, and we actually passed a bill to monitor that closer. I think Rick Beck sponsored that bill. So we're going to monitor them a lot closer since they're getting more money, and that needs to be done to make sure that they're spending the money correctly.
Well, so were you discouraged at all? And I had somebody tell me this, just in terms of the going to the people for the revenue to fund the roads, that there was no attempt to first, cut spending. Like somebody said, it would have been one thing if they would have been like, we found $50 million to cut here to do the road, so we don't need $95 million or we don't need $400 million. We only need this amount because we did at least try. But that wasn't even an option of discussion, was it?
Well, it was a discussion, not what you saw on the floor or in the committees, but it was a discussion among us in the House, and it was talked about. That was talked about 2 years ago, and I voted against that plan 2 years ago, the last session. But it's a timing issue, Paul, and the ducks just weren't in a row to do that. I mean, there was no concrete. When you get down there in the House and you're voting on bills, it's a sausage making process, and everything has to be lined up to get that done. And we just didn't get that done. There was not time to do it. And there were good ideas.
Right, and I think just from a bird's eye view, you look at past sessions. I think this was a little bit of a crisis that was put off in a way. I understand the argument. The argument, the roads are going to get so bad they're going to be even more expensive. But from a general standpoint, if you take, I'd like to get your thoughts on this. Talking with State Representative Jack Ladyman, if you take the gas tax increase, income tax was great. That was a great cut of the income tax. But then you had the gas tax, which basically took most of it back. You've got the sales tax election, which is going to be a big deal to not let it expire. Then the internet tax, and I've got DFNA's numbers, and so I'm wondering what you think. At the end of the day, are the people, especially in the first couple fiscal years, the people are going to be paying more money to the government than they were before the session? Do you agree with that?
That's possible, Paul. I don't know. I am kind of a numbers person, but I haven't really looked at that. And I understand that idea or that thought.
Yeah.
And that may be true. I'm not sure. But let me say, one thing that I saw what you just said, that people had ideas. They had 3 or 4 bills where they had means of cutting costs and applying that to the roads. One of the reasons I didn't vote for the highway plan last session was that the governor would not put any general fund money into highways, and I felt like we needed to do that. I really feel like the sales tax on cars and car parts should go to the highways because that's where it's used.
Yeah, me too.
But that was not a winnable debate. I tried that. So the governor agreed this time to at least put, I think it's $38 million from the casinos into there. I don't really care where it comes from, but it needs to come from that general fund.
Yeah.
So along that line of thought, we had 3 or 4 bills that were trying to get onto the floor that would provide money to roads without the half-cent sales tax.
Okay.
So what I did, I had a bill, didn't get a lot of attention, but it did get passed and got through. And what it does, it goes into interim status, but it requires Rev and Tax Committee, and I use that committee instead of creating a task force because that's their job. And I know a lot of people feel
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. But that is what they focus on. Now, the problem with that is you don't have the attention. I'm running this bill. I'm not on that committee. So I don't know how it doesn't work as well as a task force as far as getting your input in. I don't think, but we'll see. But what my bill does is it requires that committee to meet at least once a month and to try to identify savings, growth, efficiency improvements in state government, to allow a bill to be presented at the next session to reduce the state sales tax by 0.5%. What does that do? That basically transfers that money from general fund to highways for that half cent.
Yeah.
So you increase it for gas, you decrease it for general.
Yeah.
So it basically does what those bills were trying to do, but we have 2 years to develop that.
Yeah.
And I think I think that can be done. That's about $280 million that we need to identify. There are a lot of things going on, Paul, that are going to save us money. As a matter of fact, I was in the council meeting 2 weeks ago, and last month we were 34 million, I believe that number's right, ahead of budget. 34 million in 1 month.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that's 1 month.
Right.
And
yeah,
this
and I think it was the Gazette reported like over $100 million from 1 year to the next or something.
Yeah.
It was a lot.
It was a lot. It was a big amount.
Big number.
Now, income tax are coming in, so you can't just use 1 month.
Right.
But that's an indication. So that's a lot of money, right? And so we're going to see growth with the tax reduction, the income tax reduction. That's going to spur the economy. I think we're going to see more growth there. I think we've seen that nationally with the income tax reduction.
We're talking with State Representative Jack Ladyman, and I appreciate you talking with us on the roads. Can you talk about you as the chair of public health this session? So I don't know if we've interviewed in impressions of the session too many chairmen of committees, but you're the chair of public health. What did you think of that? Give us an impression of that.
Oh, well, I asked for a B committee, and the chair, the speaker gave me probably the busiest A committee down there. And at first it was a little shell shock because it is a very busy. You probably may have been in some of those meetings, and you realize how important it is. But I mean, public health is, it may be number one as far as affecting people, and it also has labor and welfare in that as well, which I like, the environmental and the ADEQ, working with them. But we did address a lot of important issues. The biggest thing out of public health, or the one that gets the most attention, is these scope of practice bills, because you're talking about what doctors, nurses, and anesthesiologists and those folks are allowed to do in their profession with their education. And we're engineers and farmers and insurance salespeople on that committee, judging the qualifications or the abilities of these doctors. So it's an important responsibility. It really is.
And you were supportive. I want to let the audience know you were supportive of a lot of the deregulation attempts. Not many were successful because they just didn't have the votes, but you seem to be supportive of deregulating and giving people more choice when it comes to who they see.
I was, Paul. And a lot of the doctors, we have 3 doctors in the house now. Dr. Johnson, I've become good friends with him, and Dr. Cloud, very good people. And we debated this issue, obviously. It's funny because when you get something that affects the medical field, the doctors all line up. When you get something that affects the legal field, the lawyers all line up. So you know that's going to happen. But they told me, they said, I can't believe you're an engineer. You got education, and you don't want other people doing your job that you got educated for. And what I told them was, hey, when I was a plant engineer, I wanted things given to the electricians, the mechanics, the millwrights, that I didn't have to do, so that it would free me up to do the more important things. And that also reduced costs. If I could get someone with a lower education, requirement, or education that they've gotten and paid for, that saves money. And that same thing in business can be applied to the public. So the bottom line, the reason I supported many of these things, but I vetted the education very closely of these 2 groups, whether it's the ophthalmologist and the optometrist, or the CPRNs and those folks.
Right.
But I believe if these people with and I don't want to sound negative about this, but with a lesser education are able to do more things, then it provides more access in rural areas and it reduces the cost. Okay, the ophthalmologist is a good example of that. That's the one bill that passed.
Yeah. Well, the optometrist, the ophthalmologist didn't want it.
Right.
You know,
but optometrists are in 65 counties. Ophthalmologists are only in 16 counties. And, of course, the ophthalmologist, and I understand their viewpoint.
Yeah, they spent $116,000 lobbying this session, the highest amount the ophthalmologist did.
But those folks went through a lot of education. They spent a lot of money, and they are professional, and they would provide. In a blue sky world, they would provide the best service. I don't argue that at all. And I don't argue that they don't have a better education and more qualified. They are. But it's a matter of reality. You know, if you live in southern Arkansas and you're 200 miles from an ophthalmologist and you need something that these other folks can do, that's the only way you're going to get it.
Yeah.
If you're a widow, you don't have a car, you don't have anybody to help you, you can't get to Little Rock or Fort Smith or Fayetteville or Jonesboro.
That's a great point. That's a really good point.
So they can get that there. Plus, they can do it in one visit instead of 3, so it saves a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
The question, and nobody argues that point, the question is that treatment adequate? You know, is that good enough? And that's where we vetted that thing. Mm-hmm. And if you were ever in our meetings, you know that we had multiple times where we had 10-10 votes in that committee.
Yeah.
And we had multiple roll calls. I called a few myself because I think you know that I'm going to be honest about it. If I can't tell, I'm going to call the roll.
Yeah.
And I had a few people mad at me on the committee for doing that. But, hey, if I can't see it, I'm not going to call it.
Yeah, get them on the record, too. That's what I say. I say get them on the record.
Well, we had, I would say, 4 or 5 of these issues that were 10-10 votes right down to the wire.
Yeah.
And if you were ever in there and saw us vet those bills, you know that they got vetted.
Yeah. Oh, they did. I mean, it was they examined every issue, you know, every which way to Sunday, and it was very interesting to see. You know, the medical society is extremely powerful.
Yes.
I realize that more than ever. When they decide to support something or try to oppose something, there's a lot of people, especially on the public health committee, your colleagues, they listen to what the medical society says, and so that's why I think a lot of these deregulation, that's what I call them. I think these are bills to deregulate, give people more choice, more freedom. I think that's why a lot of them failed. We're talking with State Representative Jack Ladyman. Really appreciate you spending some time with us. Your impression of the session on social issues. We don't have a lot of time left, but what did you think about the social issues?
Well, I don't have a specific one that comes to mind. I think we passed a few abortion bills, which are good. I think we need to follow suit with some of the other southern states.
Yeah.
And, you know, my top 10 folder, I think you were at a dinner meeting the other night and you heard me talk about that. And, you know, they got a lot of attention. I went to the floor, and I forget the bill, but I really got a little upset, Paul, because they were talking about, well, we're 49th in this, and thank God for Mississippi. And, and I went to the floor, and I said, look, I'm tired of this. I don't want to hear this again. I'm going to start a folder of the top 10 where our state, Arkansas, is in the top 10. And I did that. And, you know, in the medical field, as an example, we're number 6 in all of the 50 states in retaining doctors that get educated in Arkansas.
Yeah.
That's important. You know, there are other things like that that are important. But you said the medical society is strong. They're strong, and they're very important. I mean, when you talk about personal health, that's a very important issue. So they're a very important group.
Yeah, definitely. Last question. Were you in favor of moving us to a fee-for-service Medicaid expansion? Did you ever make a decision on that?
Representative Miller talked to me personally about that. That was his bill, and I supported him on that.
It's good. That would save a lot of money.
It sounds to me like it would save a lot of money. I need to get a little more information on that, but Josh, the way he explained it to me, yes, I'm supportive of that.
State Representative Jack Ladyman, I appreciate it so much for coming in and giving your impression of the session. It's always great to have you on.
Well, thanks for having me back, especially on Johnny Cash Day.
That's right. That's exactly right. Johnny Cash Friday, folks, and we're going to be back here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. All right, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, 870-275-9799. We've been doing these things. You guys know the drill. It's the impression of session time. We got 2 more tomorrow. Welcome to the program. State Representative Josh Miller is with us. He's from District 66. Josh, how are you, sir?
Man, I'm doing good, Paul. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's always great to have you on, sir. So we're going to just take it. It's impression of the session. Let's just let you have the floor, and then we can talk specifics later. State Representative Josh Miller, what was your impression of the session 2019?
Well, I thought there was some of it that was good, and some of it that sucked. And if you're a taxpayer in Arkansas, you probably, weren't that happy. If you're a freeloader in the state of Arkansas, you came out okay. And anyway, that's pretty much my impression.
Wow. So if you're a taxpayer, you weren't happy. If you're a freeloader, you came out okay. Now, when you say that, are you referring to, the fact that, according to the DFA numbers that I've seen, it looks like the people of Arkansas are going to be paying more money to the government after the session than they were before the session.
Right. That's what I'm saying. We did cut some taxes, had the income tax reduction, and I think, that was a good thing. But then, we're raising the gas taxes and all the other little ways that you get nickeled and dimed. That's not good. We are going to be paying more into the government. When the projection numbers were released here not too long ago, and we were in, let's say, council when that happened, or when we heard it, we realized that we were going to be getting enough extra revenue just from a better economy.
Wow.
That we could have pretty much taken care of the highway problem without raising taxes one bit. But that's not what we did. So anyhow, there's that's my impression on that. And then again, if you're we haven't done a whole lot as far as going back, like in what I was saying about if you're a freeloader, you're still okay. If you're just taking care of or continuing to count on government subsidies and all that kind of stuff, you're still fine because we're not making any changes to those. And anyway, if you're a big insurance company, you're going to continue to make record profits.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. We're talking State Representative Josh Miller. You did have a bill that would have pulled Arkansas to a fee-for-service model on the Medicaid expansion, would save state taxpayer dollars a gargantuan. State taxpayers a gargantuan amount of money, and you couldn't get it out of committee. Did you think you were going to get it out of committee? Because I was thinking, this bill probably didn't have a chance because of Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Right. I did think I was going to get it out of committee. I knew there were, those in leadership that were against the bill. It was a big idea. We were going to be making some major changes to our Medicaid expansion program, and those in leadership convinced a couple of votes that were Republicans.
All right, folks, we're up against another hard break. My apologies because we went long with State Representative Jack Ladyman, but we do have State Representative Brant Smith, who is now in studio as well. I thought he was still in Little Rock, but he came home last night specifically for this interview, and so he's in studio with us, and he'll be back with us in just a moment after this hard break for our affiliates. Don't go anywhere.
To go with them and vote against the bill. And that's really what hurt it. Of course, all the Democrats voted against it, which I thought was hilarious, because all the bill did was basically just, Medicaid expansion as was originally prescribed by the Affordable Care Act. And we had some really, really conservative Democrats in the House Public Health, I guess, that wanted to vote against Obamacare. So kudos to those guys and ladies.
Wow, yeah, that is interesting. I remember that. That was so strange. You would think the Democrats, but of course, it just goes to show you. I was talking last hour about the uniparty. Sometimes you get the Democrats and Republicans locking arms on things that just don't make any sense. And I think it's because it comes down to the money, and you do have these giant corporate interests that want to continue receiving corporate welfare. Even if the people aren't going to the doctor, they just have an insurance policy. We're talking with State Representative Josh Miller. Josh, what about ethics? And we heard all this talk at the beginning of the session about ethics and how we needed to have ethics reform. Are you comfortable with the amount of ethics changes that happened, or do you think there should be more?
Paul, I will say this, that personally, I don't feel any less ethical now than I did before the session started. Or more. I don't know, man. It's the bottom line, we can have committees and reforms and, legislature and all this stuff. You can't legislate just honest, decent behavior, and that's basically what all that comes down to. I don't know. I'm not saying there doesn't need to be something else. I can't think of it right now, but the bottom line is, if people want to get involved in state government or federal government or whatever at some level and be crooks, they're going to find a way. And that's why it's just very important that we pay attention to who we're voting for and who we're electing and who we're hiring to be in different positions. Because if we hire the wrong people, they can make off with a few $1 million of taxpayer money. And they might go to prison for it.
Yeah,
hopefully.
Yeah, I can appreciate your sentiment. I think that's a really good notion. That if you want to be a crook, if you're and you're a politician and you want to do, you're going to find a way to do it, because the system, we are giving people, when we vote for them, we're giving them power, and so they're going to be able to use that power to their advantage if they're so inclined to do so. So we do have to pay attention. And I honestly think, Josh, that is an argument for limited government. I mean, if you can't guarantee that there's not going to be, in this fallen world, somebody who's going to get up there and try to use their power to hurt other people who are just out there trying to make a living, then that means that what the government has the authority to do should be kept very limited in its size and its scope. Do you agree?
I do 100% agree. That you hit the nail on the head right there.
So let's talk about social issues, because we've established that the tax policy, and look, I've talked to you before. We know the taxes were. I mean, it was good to cut taxes here, but then they raised taxes, and then they took a lot more than they gave us. And I don't even like that terminology, but social issues seemed there was some unity there, right?
Well, yeah, I think so. We're a very strong pro-life state. That's not going to change.
All right, folks, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us today. We got a special treat. We got State Representative Brant Smith is with us in studio. Brant, how are you?
I'm doing great. A little bit worn down from Girl State, but
that's incredible.
Doing okay.
So Girl State is actually over. It's done.
Yes. Yes. And listen, they were so exhausted. Yesterday morning I met them. I was with Secretary of State, our treasurer, and we were on the Capitol steps as the buses rolled in from Harding University, and they were happy to be at the Capitol, but some of them looked like they were still asleep. And I said, well, what time did you go to bed last night? And they said, well, it was actually early this morning. 1:30, 2 o'clock, and then they had to roll out about 5 or so.
Yeah.
So, but for some reason, once they got in the chamber, that energy level went right back up to maximum level, and it was an awesome experience for me to see and hear the intelligence. They understood what they were trying to do.
Yeah, pass legislation, mock legislation
yes,
and stuff.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of what they presented might not wind up being actual legislation in the next general session.
Interesting. Well, we wanted to have you on because we were doing these impressions of the sessions because we're in the wake of the 92nd General Assembly.
Right.
So I'm just going to give you the floor, kind of take it where you want to take it. State Representative Brant Smith, what was your impression of the session 2019?
Well, Paul, and I appreciate that. I was listening to Jack. I've listened to Gary Stubblefield, John Payton, Josh Miller. All of these folks are my heroes. I would even say great legislation presented by Robin Lundstrom. We had on the Senate end, Breanne Davis, freshman senator. She stepped up and was involved in some critical bills.
That's what I've heard.
Well, that I had tried to get passed in, previous sessions, but being a male, and I'm trying to run a bill on female genital mutilation, to make it illegal. She picked that bill up. She ran it, and I think, was it Robin Lundstrom or Mary Bentley? One of them on the House side carried that bill, and it sailed through committees, sailed off the Senate floor and the House floor, and the governor signed it. And so
great.
For people that don't know about FGM, that's important for our future and for the health and well-being of our young girls in this state.
Yeah, well, and it's also an example of being left of bang, which we've talked about.
Exactly.
You want to be preemptive before
right.
the event happens.
Well, and then I hate to just talk about what I carried or what I presented, but that's probably why I'm here. But I was asked to carry a resolution, 2 resolutions. One was on CARE, which is the Muslim, fundraising wing or arm of Hamas and Hezbollah.
Yeah, CARE.
Center for American and Islamic Relations.
Yeah.
And,
were they an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land trials? Is that CARE or is that the Muslim Brotherhood?
Well, they're all linked.
All linked, yeah.
They were, I believe they were indicted.
Yeah.
And as a result, the Speaker, Matt Shepard, and some of the others in the House started receiving emails and phone calls from the headquarters out of D.C. You don't want to do this. You don't understand what we're about. There was a great deal of pressure put on members of the House not to support that resolution. And even to this day, the Southern Poverty Law Center calls me and asks for interviews, and so I reached out to Colonel Paul Deckert and Christopher Holton, our friends, and I said,
the Center for Security Policy,
out of D.C., and I said, they want to interview me on why I'm
the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Why I'm a hater, and they said, you know what, let it go, because they're just setting you up for an ambush.
Yeah.
So after multiple calls and voicemail, messages, they quit calling. But I've had other people out of Ohio and different places around the states leave me voice messages. And one guy, he never could say my name, but he just said, Bud, you need to get your facts straight, Bud, and talking about Netanyahu being the most dangerous man on the planet. And so I just, I told Paul Deckert, I said, Colonel, the thing about this is, I think they just want me to know that they have my phone number and my contact information.
Yeah.
And Paul was so, precise. He says, and we have theirs. So,
Colonel Deckert. Matter of fact, when I heard that you were running that resolution, I was hoping that the folks from Frank Gaffney's Center for Security Policy would show up and testify.
Well,
just
and he
because
did.
I love Colonel Paul Deckert. He's a great guy to talk to and hang out with, and I got to do that a little bit.
Yeah, he's a great guy, and I think we all sat around and had a meal together in a previous session over American Laws for American Courts. But I have a lot of respect for them. And what people don't understand.
I celebrated Colonel Paul Deckert's birthday. It was his birthday one night, and I went out with we went out me and Christopher.
Yeah,
and we had it was a really fun educational evening.
Did I go on that one?
No, that was the last session.
Okay.
But this one was this was after they were there.
Okay.
You know, for I
know
resolution.
One of those dinners. It was during Lent, and they had given up alcohol.
Yep.
So I thought, well, good. At least I don't have to buy their beer and their drinks, because I was treating them. But so we got that resolution passed out of the House and the Senate. And a resolution is really non-binding. It doesn't have any weight in some ways, but it was powerful.
Right.
That we would say to law enforcement across the state of Arkansas, we highly encourage you not to cooperate with CARE.
Right.
Because they're desensitizing our law enforcement.
And what CARE does is they come in and they try to offer these classes to law enforcement. And from what I can tell, it's just a ruse. It's like you said, desensitize and that sort of thing. And little takia, if you will.
Yeah. Well, and another resolution. Of course, Tim Loggins approached me for Patriots of Act 746 and asked, "Hey, would you be willing to carry a resolution to clarify gun rights in the state of Arkansas?" And I said, "Absolutely." I never even hesitated. I'm not just a hunter, but I believe in our Second Amendment right to carry, unconcealed or concealed. It's up to the citizen to make that call.
Yes.
So I had some help with the resolution, and initially the resolution was probably 25 or 30 words. If that many. I've never counted them, but when I took it to BLR, they were so worried about it, and they were doing their job. They have a job to do, and they want to make sure that everything is perfect. So they came back and said, we want to revise this, and it turned out to be like a 2 or 3 page.
Were they concerned about the resolution? Because that's what's funny. It's a non-binding thing. It's not law, but were they concerned about the resolution fitting into the concealed carry code?
You know what? I worked with 2, maybe 3 attorneys over at BLR on that. And I think the major concern was they didn't want it opposed in the courts, and they were trying to navigate carefully with all the language and verbiage so that if it was scrutinized, that they protected themselves.
I understand.
And BLR, they're awesome people, great people. In this case, because the right to carry and bear arms is such a controversial issue with the gun control freaks, that they wanted to make sure that everything was better than what we initially had written up. And so I just submitted the revised version, which was like 2, maybe 3 pages long, to Tim and the organization, and he took it to one of their meetings on a Saturday, and it met with so much anger and frustration over how does this clarify? There's more language in it than is necessary. So I took it back to BLR and I said, we're going back to the original document, and they encouraged me not to do that.
Yeah. And the original document is simple. It's just saying we're a constitutional carry state. You can carry concealed or unconcealed. And the Taft decision, Taft versus the state of Arkansas,
validated that right. Well, and of course opposition in the committee from mostly Democrats.
Oh yeah.
It was a partisan.
Let me tell you something. When you were at the end of that committee, the House Judiciary Committee, Tim Loggins from Patriots, VEX 746 was there. Were you amazed? I think he might be the best supporting witness, if you can call it a witness, or somebody testifying for something. Well, he knew the code backwards and forwards.
He did, and I think he outspoke the opposition.
Mm-hmm. And I think he reassured any Republicans that might have had, might have been 80% on board or something like that.
Right.
They're like, the law is clear.
He was so succinct and accurate.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing about, and I respect attorneys that are on that Judiciary Committee. They're all friends of mine. But I can tell you, they know the law too. And it's hard to argue with the law when it's being presented correctly.
Yeah.
By a witness.
Right.
And Tim did an outstanding job. I was just sitting there, I was kind of stoic as I sat there, but inside I was thinking, that's a three-pointer.
That was a big deal. It passed the committee, passes the House, and then, of course, Senator Flip on the other end
picked it up,
companion resolution, it passed. So there's now been clarity provided if anybody, wanted it. And so this was a big victory that you were a part of, and the people of Arkansas are going to benefit from it.
And that's what happened with the resolution against CARE, picked up on the Senate end, and it just sailed through.
Right.
I think we touched on some real hard, kind of like white elephants or elephants in the room issues, and we just dealt with it.
Yeah.
And so I was proud of both the House and the Senate for getting behind those resolutions.
So let's talk what I might consider another elephant in the room in the wake of the session, and let's talk tax policy. So we had good income tax reduction. That's a straight cut in a straight bill, 6.9 to 5.9, great. But then it seems like there's an effort to get the money back with a gas tax increase, a half-cent sales tax going on the ballot to keep the tax from sunsetting, and then the internet sales tax and everything else. And I know there was internet sales tax specifically, there was corporate tax cuts in the future as well, and that kind of made it hard to vote against or vote for, But what I want to know, Brand, is what do you think? I've got the DFNA numbers, but do you agree that the people are going to be paying more money to the government than they were before?
And I've listened to other legislators that have come on your program, and I think the consensus is probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, but here's the thing, too. I did sign that no new tax pledge back in, I think, 2014. I don't think I've signed it since, but a promise is a promise. And I took the approach that Jack Ladyman took, that even though he didn't sign it, he was able to discern when he should vote in favor of a tax increase as opposed to when he should not. And for the most part, Representatives Ladyman, Tosh, Sullivan, and I have all been very adamant about not voting for tax increases. In this case, and I've been raked over the coals a few times for it, but the average constituent that I have had conversations with, they understand that without a good infrastructure, highways, bridges that are in disrepair, we're not going to have some of that development in our business goals if people can't get their products to and from market. That we have to have safety first in our highways and infrastructure. And that I told Michael Wickline of the Gazette, Democrat Gazette, I said, that was a hard vote for me.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do it. As a matter of fact, initially, I thought, hey, this is not going to be a problem for me. I'll sign on as a co-sponsor. And then when the bill was actually headed to the House floor, I added an amendment, which some people considered a hostile amendment. Here I am, a co-sponsor on the bill. I do plan on voting for it, but I had my name removed as a co-sponsor. And that held that bill up for 2 or 3 days. And it made a lot of people angry. So even yesterday during Girls State, one of the legislators approached me. I was sitting at the back. or standing, and they said, "Hey, would you like to go down front and talk about how to hold up a Senate bill?" You know, and I'm like, no, I don't. But I voted for it because I want economic development to continue to move forward in Northeast Arkansas. We're a blessed region of the state, but I did it. I even told you, I think, in advance. I'm gonna do this.
I get the arguments for it. I disagree.
Yeah, of course.
But
yeah, of course you do. But here's another legislator, and I were talking yesterday about it, and he was saying the very people that were telling me, when are you going to fix our roads? When are you going to get our bridges fixed? Now, this is just yesterday.
Yeah.
He says after that passed and the money started trickling out for repairs and upgrades, the same person that was being critical, when are you going to fix my roads, are saying, I had to sit in that line for an hour.
Yeah.
So,
but last question. What about spending though? We've got to quit spending so much money, right? Then you don't have to go back to the people as often and ask for revenue. I mean, ideally never.
Well, and I like the approach Dan Sullivan takes. If it increases the size of government by adding bodies to agencies and people to agencies, he typically votes no.
Mm-hmm.
If it increases taxes, he votes no. And I think that's why he is considered one of the most conservative men, legislators in the House. And so I kind of broke ranks on that vote this time, but I think my intentions were right. But we had other highway bills, but they never made it to the floor.
Yeah,
and they weren't going to be allowed to make it.
That's
the big thing.
That's the big thing. Yeah, Julie Mayberry's bill wasn't going to be allowed. Will you stick around real quick? I want to ask you one more question on the legal immigration sanctuary cities.
Okay.
All right, we'll be right back with State Representative Brand Smith.
Anytime we can, run a bill that has anything to do with a pro-life stance, you're going to see quite a bit of unity there. Also, guns. That's another bill, another big deal. Very strong Second Amendment. Quite a bit of unity there. Maybe not as much unity as some would like. I think we should combine the two next session and look into the possibility of running a bill that says every baby born in the
Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Arkansas gets a firearm and a scholarship for an enhanced carry permit
just
at birth.
At birth.
awarded, but I may run that bill.
Scholarship.
I'm not sure.
I think that's fantastic.
And then we could take care of our social issues just right up front. Here's what we're going to do. If you, when you're born in the state of Arkansas, you get a gun and a scholarship for an enhanced carry class.
That's great. I love it.
So we could have the Patriots of Act 746 and Family Council working together, consulting on this bill, and I think it would be wonderful.
They're listening right now. I'm sure both. I know for a fact people from both of those organizations are listening right now. So that would be great. You need to draft that up. Send it to us. We'll write an article.
I'm going to work on that.
Okay.
I'm going to work on that. Hey, one thing that was really important to me during the session, and in all seriousness, was we finally got a bill passed that is going to mandate that DHS eliminate the developmentally disabled waiver waiting list. I've been working on that for a number of sessions.
All right, real quick, we don't have a lot of time. Real quick, State Representative Brant Smith, wrapping up his impression of the session. You took to the House floor and spoke for the anti-sanctuary city bill. Tell us about that issue at the end of the session.
Well, that bill, I think it was 411 House bill or Senate bill 411
from Senator Stubblefield.
From Senator Stubblefield. We had spoken for over a year about doing something like this, and he filed his bill, and then asked me to carry it on the House end, which we lost it in the committee one day, and we came back after some sitting down and thinking about how do we get this thing back on the floor and through committee, and we were able to do it. There was a lot of wrangling about the Democrats are going to want fiscal impact statements and everything to go along with it. So met with some of the BLR people, and they said there's no fiscal impact to the state on your bill. As a matter of fact, if a city decides to become a sanctuary where they have a policy from their city council or whatever, quorum courts, whatever, how that works, they could lose money. So the state could actually save money. And I said, can you put that down, that there's no fiscal impact to the state? And they said, yes. And I said, how long will it take you? Could you do it in the next 5 minutes? And they said, we can. So we went back to committee, and it was so funny because some of the Democrats were yelling about there's no fiscal impact statement, and Nelda speaks. She picks up her fiscal impact statement and waves it around and says, well, I have one right here. And so then they were so stunned that it ended the questions. Mm-hmm. And the vote was favorable and went back to the floor. They tried that again on the House floor.
Yeah.
And
Charles Blake did.
Yes.
Who's now resigned as a minority leader
right.
and going to work
I
for
hope I had something to do with that. But I think that there was a lot more at stake. There was a lot of pressure around the state. Don't go this route. Don't go this route. But it's the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And I'm thankful to Gary Stubblefield, to the Senate for passing it, and to House members. And basically, when I went to the House floor, I'd already decided I am not taking questions. The debate already took place in committee. I'm just going to make my comment and step away.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And there were Democrats standing up, getting ready to hammer me.
Yep.
And once you're out of the well.
Once you're out of the well, also, there was a lot of activists on the left who were up in the gallery. You could tell some of these Democrats just wanted a grandstand.
Well, what I wanted to say.
It was going to pass.
What I wanted to say is to those in the gallery who are opposed to this sanctuary policy bill, we have 40-something ICE agents in the state capitol, so you may want to exit through a different door on your way out. And then I thought, no,
probably
that's kind of mean-spirited. I won't do that, but in my heart, I was saying it.
State Representative Brant Smith, thank you so much for being on. We appreciate
let's come back sometime and talk about the Arkansas School for Math, Science, and the Arts.
Yes. We ran out of time, but I hear there are reports, very disturbing reports about what's going on.
And it's broad in the allegations And so it's not just students that are upset, faculty,
Yeah.
administrators.
We'll do
parents.
this soon. We'll do this very soon.
Thank you.
Folks, have a great weekend. Arkansas, be safe.